The thing that I enjoyed about the op-ed and the paper on which it was based is it talked about transitioning things where we're moving away from the immediate emergency phase. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that I thought were interesting about the paper in the proposals is and significant and should be encouraged is the directing more of the aid to tying it to individuals and to take some of the business aid and not just try to freeze in place everything that we were doing in February and say, okay, let's try to hold everything in place until we can get back to it, because you could do that initially, but after a while, when you try to get people back to work, as Jason was saying, the economy is not going to look the same as it is. A lot of businesses aren't going to make it; they're going to go under. So there'll be a need for a transition to a different type of aid to businesses, maybe not just trying to prop up failing businesses and freeze employees in place there by just sending them checks for employment that may not exist anymore, but thinking about a transition and adopting the policies to fit that transition. And so that's why I would encourage people to look at that. And that's what I think Congress should be looking at is how is this how is this next phase going to do more than freeze everything in place and do a rational transition? I know, Jason, you looked at some, as you would expect from the group of authors, some economic impact and some fiscal impact. And could you just sort of briefly summarize what those policies might cost and why it was judged to be worth it?
Yeah. First of all, let me just agree with the first set of what you said, and then I'll get to answering your question. Some of the initial response was basically, we're going to shut the economy down for 2 months. We need to tide you through, and then it'll all come back and be exactly the same. Clearly, that might have made sense at the time. That is not a good basis to go on for the next year until we have a vaccine. This is going to have a very, very big impact on economic activity. Even after we have a vaccine, there'll be all sorts of permanent changes that this created. Even if people are going to as many restaurants and doing as many travels as they were before, just the companies, may turn over and be different. And so that's why I think, Bob, you're absolutely right that doing things at the individual level rather than the business level is the main focus we should have. Now, loans for businesses, and they can even be subsidized loans for businesses and grants for individuals, because
loans for businesses like to restock and revamp their workplaces for a COVID-friendly environment, if there's such a thing. That sounds a little bit silly, but
right.
That's
Exactly.
what I get. The point is, yeah, you'd still have loans for businesses, but not just to necessarily freeze things.
Exactly. Yeah, you're not freezing. And a loan for business, by the way, if the bank is taking some of the risk of that loan, they're going to only want to make that loan if they think they're probably going to be repaid. So, you'll have some loans that go bad, certainly, but the bulk of them will be oriented towards a company that needs money now, and it will still exist a year from now, and it will pay you back. So you won't actually have expended anything. So I think to do that for businesses and grants for individuals, because there's so many individuals that can't get a job now, and that there's not a job for them, we need to do something for them. In terms of the price tag, before telling you the exact numbers, let me tell you how we thought about it. We did not say we want a plan that costs $1.5 trillion and what do we add up to get there. We also did not say, no matter what we do, our plan cannot cost more than, $1 trillion. We didn't start from the size. We started from the sort of ground up micro programs. What makes the most sense for unemployment insurance? What would you need to do to prevent hunger? What's a reasonable size incentive for work that's not so, out of whack, et cetera? What are the deficits that states and localities face? And, what would you need to cover, a substantial portion of them, et cetera? And so we put our policies down and then we added it up. In terms of what it added up to, it depends on how the economy does. If there's a really rapid recovery, it will cost $1 trillion. If the recovery was slow and painful, it would cost about $2 trillion. In reality, it might be somewhere in between the two of those, plus one additional thing that we did not include in our estimates, which is the Congressional Budget Office would also score the fact that not just in this recession, but that there might be another recession 7 or 8 years from now. And some of our ideas would permanently help us deal with recessions. And so they'd also attach a cost to that as well.
And taking, I guess, a step back and looking at these 4 parts and this, I guess, sort of package of policies that you're recommending, it's no secret that Congress is getting caught up right now sort of in the politics of the day, and any additional relief packages that are being considered are sort of having the Christmas tree effect take place, where members of Congress are trying to add things to it because it'll effectively be viewed as a must-pass bill. So first question is, how politically feasible do you think these policy recommendations are in this current environment? And second question, how should Congress be looking at this situation as it makes decisions on policy?
Yeah. So I don't know how much it does or doesn't matter that there's broad agreement among economists across the political spectrum with a plan like this. And I think that is very clear from the fact that Glenn Hubbard and I both signed on to it, along with Tim Geithner and Melissa Kearney. I think that does matter a bit. I have had conversations with members of Congress from both parties who actually want to say, let's not talk about politics right now. What do you actually think needs to be done? What do you think will work? What do you think will not work? I think there are some of them that in private understand a little bit better than you would guess from the way they talk about in public. So I think there's a certain amount there, but there's an enormous partisan logjam too. In part, the logjam is just different philosophies. Democrats like SNAP program, which provides food benefits. Republicans tend not to. But the bigger issue, I think, is complacency. I think there are too many Republicans that look at the tremendous numbers we saw in the economy in May and ask, why do we need to do anything more? And my response is, we only had those tremendous numbers because we did a lot. So we need to keep doing a lot or those numbers will go away. And there's a lot of uncertainty in the future. But I think complacency right now is, for many people, the biggest obstacle to getting something done. Then finally, when it does get done, the HEROES Act that passed the House, that was $3 trillion, had a lot of really good, important things in it, but it also accumulated an awful lot of, barnacles would be the polite word for them. Things like reinstating the deduction for state and local taxes. I think that's a bad idea in general. And it's, even if it's a good idea, it's not a good idea for fiscal stimulus for right now. The White House floated a capital gains tax holiday. I think that's a bad idea in general. And certainly, even if you liked it, now isn't any particularly special moment for it. So, those types of things and avoiding them, I hope Congress can do it as much as possible, because that just means more money for what's good and important.